I'm Professor Sampath Seneviratne. I'm a professor in zoology at the Department of Zoology and Environment Sciences, the University of Colombo. While I'm teaching students about animals and environment, I'm a scientist specializes in the evolution of birds, bird ecology, endemism, and in this context, the migration ecology of birds in the Central Asian flyway. My PhD student, Ms. Gayamini Panagoda, is a PhD candidate, and she is working on migration ecology of birds in this flyway, which we call Central Asian flyway, which spans across Asia, across 30 countries, where Sri Lanka locates in a pivotal position. Sri Lanka has about 500 species of birds. Of that 500 species, about 250 species are born and raised and die in this island. Therefore, we call them resident species. Of that resident species, about 34 species are only found in Sri Lanka, where we call them endemic species to Sri Lanka. The rest of the 250 species of birds are called migrants or migratory birds, or we also call them winter visitors, where they breed in other parts of the world, and during the winter months they come to Sri Lanka and spend about 6 months here with our environment and with our other birds. We call them the winter migrants or migratory birds. Mannar in that context is a very important place because they fly through Mannar in the process of entering to Sri Lanka and leaving after spending about 6 months. So these days, as we are doing this special tagging system, which we call satellite tagging or GSM GPS tagging, it's a quite sophisticated cutting edge technology available for this sort of migratory studies across the globe, and actually the technology that we use here is quite new. For example, this is a satellite, this is a tag that we are using. This is quite expensive, about the same price as a small laptop. It has a solar panel to recharge the battery. It charges the battery every day from morning to afternoon, and then it has a GPS unit, global positioning unit, where it can communicate with the satellite and recognize its position across anywhere in the globe. And then it has an antenna to transmit and communicate with the satellite, and then a circuit that detects the motion, the movement, because this device can tell us the actual location of this bird. So that's quite a bit of information, and that can come in every half an hour or every 2 hours or once a day, depending on the way how we program. So those data can be propagated onto a base map, and that map, by looking through time, we would be able to know the locations of the bird. For example, in this case, this bird, it's a Hughlin gull, data points in every half an hour over a span of couple of years, and in the process we now know its exact migratory route. It flew from Mannar, where we banded at Urumale, to Tamil Nadu, and then it flew across India to Kerala beach, and from there Goa to Maharashtra, and then to Gujarat. And in Gujarat, it flew to Pakistan and entered into Lahore and spent few days at Lahore, and then went to Kandahar, Afghanistan, and then Tajikistan to Kazakhstan, and through Kazakhstan it went into the Ob River in Russia, and along the Ob River it flew towards Europe, and eventually crossed the Urals and entered into Europe. So in the process it flew 24,000 kilometers, crossed 9 countries, 25 main cities, and 24,000 kilometers. What this thing does, when you attach it to deploy it to a bird, it will tell us where these birds go outside the borders of the Sri Lanka. Because we get birds from about 1/3 of the terrestrial world of this planet, ranging from far eastern Russia and western Alaska in the eastern side, and the Arctic across the northern side, and then the Europe, Scandinavia and the Urals, in the Alps in the west and in between. So all these birds, including India, Himalayas, Mongolia, Kazakhstan and the southern Russia, eastern China, Australia, they all eventually come and would come potentially come to Sri Lanka. But the problem is that we don't know exactly where they come from, and also we don't know what kind of a flight plan they use, what kind of a stopover sites they use, and what kind of directions that they take as they fly. So this will tell us never a set of information about how they do that. So we have here like 3 different designs. Mostly this the design is governed by the requirement of the bird, like the limitations of the bird. For example, this is a decoy of a bar-tailed godwit. I mean, it's not the best replication, but it has the correct size and the correct shape. I'm just using that as an example. So if I try to put this one, it's too big, because the international standard for these tags is to have 3% of the only to go up to 3% of the body weight. So if you have say 100 gram bird, then you can only have 3 gram, the maximum 3 gram weight for the tag and the harness and everything. So that is a huge limitation when it comes to deploying these. So we have to go for a specific size class, and this one is about 6 grams, and it has 2 antennas, solar panel and the device. The advantage of all these 3 technologies is that we don't entirely depend on satellite technology, because relying on satellites is very expensive. You have to pay subscription, annual subscription, and also satellite companies charge a lot. But instead we depend on the GSM networks, the mobile network in whatever the countries that these birds go through. So that way it gives us same quality of information in a much cheaper cost, and we don't have to subscribe, have to go for an annual subscription basis. So which is much more sophisticated in a way and a simpler system for us. So these 3 tags that we use, this is a smaller one which is about 6 grams. So that means it can go to birds like green shanks, red shanks, and then crab plovers, that sort of birds can get this. Anything about slightly below 200 grams, this tag is the way to go. It has small attachment positions for the jacket, the harness to go. And this tag is about 9 grams. It has the same exact architecture, except that this one has a feather guard, because as the feathers grow, the feathers could interfere the solar panel, and that would interfere the daily charging of the battery. But otherwise it's the same, but you can remove this if you want. Normally we remove this to keep the weight even low. And it has a prominent antenna, and this normally it goes something like this onto the back. There's 2 ways to do that. One way is that you can put it into the rump, the back of the bird. The other way is that you can put it into the saddle. Normally we put it this way. There are different ways of doing it. This is for larger godwits, curlews, Eurasian curlew, oyster catcher could get this. And then the third kind is 23 grams. It's quite heavy. It doesn't have a jutting out antenna, but it's heavy. But it's in a way its structure is sophisticated, because it has the solar panel slightly raised from the unit, because this can go on ducks, eagles, like pelicans, like bigger feathery birds, bigger in size. So since it's 23 grams, it has to go it can go to birds about 600 grams, so above. It also has a solar panel, GPS unit, the motion detector, temperature detector, and the light sensor So it will tell you whether it's a day or night. So that's the three basic devices that we use for three different types of birds. When we comes to the geographical position of Sri Lanka, we are uniquely positioning this in the world map. We are truly the center of Asia. North of us, we have the Indian subcontinent, and then the Asia, a bit of Europe. From south of us, we have the Great Indian Ocean. If a bird flies from north through Asia to south through the southern Indian peninsula, it will end up in Sri Lanka, and beyond Sri Lanka, it has about 8,000 kilometers of deep blue ocean before it reaches the Antarctic continent. In that context, Sri Lanka is the end of the Central Asian flyway if a bird flies from Asia to south. The Rama's Bridge, very important in this story because some of the birds in large numbers fly through this Rama's Bridge to enter Sri Lanka from the South Asian peninsula. The Rama's Bridge is commonly known as Adam's Bridge or Ramasetu or Nalasetu. These are all different names given to this landmass through time. It's a very old landmass, and there are very old stories about it, both in India and in Sri Lanka. Rama's Bridge is a very diverse, very important, culturally rich place. From tiny diatoms, algae, to crustaceans, small crustacean-eating fish, to medium-sized fish, to large fish, to dugong, to marine mammals, whales, dolphins, to oceanic birds, shorebirds, to forest birds are all found in this stretch of land. Marine invertebrates live in the sandy, shallow seabed as well as warm, stable waters of the Pog Bay, which gives the foundation to this rich ecosystem. Manna is very rich for shellfish, fish and large fish fishery. Along the Rama's Bridge, about 18 islands are located. Of that, 9 belongs to Sri Lanka and the rest of the 9 belongs to India. Those islands are sandy and we call them dancing islands because they move slowly in every year with the movement of the oceanic currents and wind. Some of the islands in the Rama's Bridge has small forest patches, and those forest patches are critical for forest birds to move from India to Sri Lanka while they are migrating through the Central Asian flyway. And in Urmala area, where it is mostly forested, these birds that through thousands of kilometers will reach eventually to the Urmala area, and Urmala area has fairly rich green shrublands, and these shrublands provide the vital resupply and resting places for the birds. Because of that, the shrubland environments of Mannar, and especially in the western part of Mannar, plays a very important role in providing the needed vital energy for these birds that are traveling through the Central Asian flyway. So they are tired, and when they cross Ramasetu, they'll rest in this Urmala area. That's where we come in and use some of them for our research. These are called mist nets. There are several kinds of mist nets. The ones that we use in the lagoon in the near ocean are mist nets designed for wading birds or shorebirds. They are much tougher, bigger, and they are more like fish nets. But these are very delicate, almost transparent, hard to see, and in good conditions, like this kind of condition where when it is placed against a darker, cluttered environment, it is almost invisible. That's why we call them mist nets. So this particular type of mist nets are used for forest birds. What we try to do here in Mannar, we are at the right by the Rama's Bridge. So this sort of small forest patches, they look like just desolate dry shrubs, but they are actually reminiscent of African acacia forest, and these are the first kind of refueling stations for these birds that cross the Indian Ocean through Pok Strait, and they spend about a day or two or probably even a week and then move into inland, sometimes to Horton Plains, sometimes to Singaraja, Vilpattu and all the other places. So these birds we call forest birds because they mostly live in forested areas or sometimes in the deep forest and in the jungle. Wading birds or the shorebirds, the other side of this story, where they move from other wetlands of the world to Sri Lanka and back and forth. And they normally don't come to this sort of forested areas, they stay in the open wetlands. So the techniques that we use through the oceans are another different kind, a special kind that very hard to study. So most of the studies that we done in Sri Lanka over the past 100 to 200 years are mostly confined to shorebirds or wading birds and the forest birds. So this is the morning. The mudflats are most active in the morning. There's two factors in this sort of a very large exposed mudflats has. One is the tide, the high tide and the low tide. Near full moon and new moon, you have two cycles of like in a day. You have two high tides and two low tides. So that tide plays a critical role in this sort of exposed mudflats, especially in the northern province and few in the Hambantota district. You don't have this sort of exposed mudflats in wet zone and inland. So this is coastal or away from the coast, and these are some of the best mudflats for migratory birds in Asia. So it's a unique place, and so one factor is the tide, the other factor is the time of the day. The birds that we are interested here are mostly shorebirds and few seabirds, and the shorebirds are they active all day around, but they are relatively inactive during midday and midnight. But most active around 5 o'clock in the morning till about 8 o'clock, and again about 5 o'clock in the evening until about 8 o'clock. So now it's in the morning, 6 o'clock, perfect timing in terms of the time of the day, and we are at the low tide. So that's the right combination. When those two combinations come into like a superimpose in the favor of the bird, then you have a large aggregation of birds. So we can see about over 50,000 birds in this mudflat right now. And the trick is that if you just looked at it, you see here and there few birds. But if you look through this, you will see this mudflat is kind of full of small birds. The birds representing about 1/3 of the terrestrial land of this planet can be found here. So it's a magnifying glass where like everything gets concentrated into here, where we can see the world, its ecology, biology, toxins from these mudflats. That's why we wanted to put tags and markers to look into the world from here in Sri Lanka, but we can see the changes happening in other parts of the world. We learn at school and other places where tropical rainforests like Singaraja has the highest biodiversity. However, anybody who been to Singaraja would know very few animals that you can see, and if you go to Boondala, or if you go to Kumana, or if you go to Mana, you will see like thousands, tens of thousands of birds aggregate in very small areas and feed without any fights or competition. How can they do that? The trick is that they have adaptations to feed in different layers in the wetland. In the drier side layers, in the closer to the land or on the land, birds with short legs and small beaks with large eyes pick insects and other small animals by sight. And then another layer of birds or a line of birds would be placed slightly closer to the water in a slightly wetter ground. They would have slightly longer beaks and they would poke the ground and pick worms a few centimeters below the ground. They might have smaller eyes because they don't use eyes for feeding. Some birds have even longer beaks. They might go few centimeters deeper, avoiding the other birds and feed on worms. Some birds have much longer beaks, like a couple of about 30 centimeters or about a foot or even longer beaks. They will not compete with others because they will go couple of about a foot deep into the mud and pick larger worms. Some birds have up curved beaks, so they will not compete with down curved beak birds. And further into the water, for example, like ducks, they have shorter webbed feet which they can swim with. They'll swim into the water and they'll have soft, flat, small beaks, and they'll dive into the water and feed on vegetation, aquatic submerged vegetation, and they'll swim around. And storks, especially the large storks like painted storks or adjutants or blackneck storks, they'll walk into the water with their long legs like a stilt fisherman and wait till large fish come to come, and then they'll use their powerful beaks to forage. So, none of these layers compete with the other layers. As a result, very large numbers like thousands, tens of thousands, and in Mannar, for example, sometimes nearly 1 million birds can aggregate into one location and without competing forage. Unlike wildlife observations, when you do molecular ecology or wildlife research, sometimes you have to catch these wild birds, and that has to be done in great care. There are specific techniques, there are specific training is required to master those techniques, and you have to practice it, and also you need specific legal coverage to do that, and that legal coverage is provided by the Research Committee of the Wildlife Department of Sri Lanka, and the techniques can be learned through certain university programs, and the practicing has to be done in this sort of banding camps. There are internationally accepted capture methods, internationally accepted capture equipment for this process, and it is a very tedious, very delicate operation where only trained researchers can perform. When we handle birds, there's two main ways of handling. One is called the bander's grip, where you hold the bird using your left palm, and you use that grip, the bander's grip, to hold the bird while you are measuring. The second technique is called photographer's grip, where you hold the bird from the right hand, and it exposes the plumage, so it is better for photographing a bird while in captivity. This bird is a very unique bird. We caught this bird in 2018 October. That means the fall, or when the beginning of the migration in 2018 in October, we caught this bird. This is the first lesser sandplover we caught in this program in Mannar, and so this bird breeds in Mongolia and came to this mudflat in October, and we caught it. And then we measure it, we took blood, the fat profile, the molting scores, basically a kind of health check, and the measurements and all, and put this specific metal ring. This ring is a metal, non-corrosive metal, special ring that has some information about where it was banded, and also a specific number. And also we put a green plastic, in this case a green can vary from bird to bird, to locate the bird in the mudflat, so we can see that it's banded. And now, this October, we caught it today. And the important thing about it is that, so normally people would ask, like putting a ring and a plastic thing and handling, and would this affect these birds? The answer is no, because this bird, after it's been caught and measured and all the analysis, had travelled back to Mongolia in March 2019. That is about 6,000 to 7,000 kilometers. And then it bred in Mongolia, and in last October, it must have came back to this site, another 7,000, just between the two countries, and probably even more because they fly around as well. So this small tiny bird had traveled about 20,000 kilometers just simply to get into its breeding site to wintering sites. And we know that because of these rings. So it is critical to understand, and what we do, understand these birds and what they do, and basically how life moves around in the planet. See, this is the wing. So this area used for propulsion, forward propulsion, and this area used for lift. And then this bird has another second kind of projection. It's a kind of a pseudo wing. So this bird uses two wings. In a normal bird, like if you get a polficha or a demolicha or a myna, it doesn't have this part. It's something like this. And it doesn't have elongated this part because it doesn't need that much propulsion. So this is like a jet engine, like a wing of a jet, fighter jet. It has very high propulsion, and it can fly very fast, very long distances. And to facilitate that, it has a second such structure developed to extra propel it. So this is like a long distance flying machine, even though it's a tiny bird. So this doesn't need that extra stopover. And in this particular case, in 2018 we had a blood test, a cholesterol check, measurements. It's basically a general health check of the bird. Now after 2 years, now we can do it today again. So like a doctor, a medical doctor checking the patient's history, now we can check this bird's history, medical history, like health and its well-being. And that way we can look into the well-being of the planet, because you can't just put a thermometer or some equipment to the ground and get that. To understand how the planet sustains life and how it continues to do that, and are there any problems for that, can be understood only through studying the health and the well-being of its users. And these are the users, and we are also the users. So what we learn from them would apply to us. So this is not just about birds. This is not just about love for birds or love for nature or getting a good photograph or anything. It's about to understand the home, the only home that we live in, the place where we call home, and whether it's doing well or whether there are problems. If there's problems, then we can inform the authorities. There's a myth going on, spreading by some people, that the banding could damage the leg because of the plier. But it's a myth, because these pliers, these are called banding pliers. So they are specifically constructed to avoid catching the leg. See, so when you even close it, the leg stays within the band without the plier, without causing any damage. So these are special pliers called banding pliers. So if you come for a banding station, then you would know this. But some of these people, they never seen a banding station, so they don't know what they are talking about. Now we are trying to catch a bird from the wetland. We will try to catch migratory species from the Urumale wetland here. The most exciting as well as most challenging part of bird research is when you try to catch a bird in the field. It's challenging because you have to be worried about the safety of the bird, you have to be worried about the safety of you and the people involved, as well as you have to worry about the safety of the equipment, and at the end of the day you have to be worried about every aspect of these steps. Capturing wild birds, normally we use either early in the morning before sunlight or late in the day after sunset. So the dawn and dusk is preferred for capturing, partly because the direct sun causing extra stress for these birds, especially when we are handling them. Anyway, it's very stressful for them. So if we catch them in the wild in midday, it's very stressful for the birds. So we normally use early morning and late evening or night for that purpose. So this is a very exciting find. This is an exciting bird. In ornithologically speaking, it's a rare migrant come to visit Sri Lanka in October to March, and this is called a Terek sandpiper. It's a rare migrant even in the birding circle among birders and photographers. And this bird has a unique beak. You can see that it's an upcurved beak, and it's uniquely evolved to eat things like this. That the thing that runs around is called a tiger beetle, and these birds feed on small insects on the mud flat, and we strategically place these nets to catch birds like this. But they are very valuable birds in terms of its biodiversity value, and they are very delicate. People would think that they would be very dangerous because with these sharp beaks. Actually, they have very delicate beaks. They are like butterflies, very delicate, but they can fly 25,000–30,000 kilometers one way and twice a year from their breeding grounds to here, and spend 6 months in Sri Lanka and spend 6 months in their breeding grounds. So how you identify a Terek sandpiper? It has red, like orange legs, short legs, and a very long upcurved beak. We'll first extract the bird, and then I'll show you how you identify it. So it's right now in a small tiny pocket that itself created by moving. So I'm just getting the bird out from that pocket. We are going to do now. So we'll securely place this bird in this bag, which is we call it a bird bag. It's a very secure way of moving a bird from one place to another, and so Gayamini will help me with that. And then we'll place a uniquely numbered metal band and a flag. We'll explain what it is when we are doing it, and the flag will go to its leg, and it will carry a unique number with a specific identifier for Sri Lanka. This is a small bird, so we can't put a satellite tag for it, but we will take quite valuable scientific information, and then after we'll release the bird back to its initial capture place, which is this mud flat. People would wonder why we put these birds into a cloth bag. Why not a cage? Cage is a bad idea because when you put a bird in a cage, it will try to fly around, injure itself. Its beaks could get injured, wings, feathers could get disrupted. It could see other people and also they get stressed and all. In a cloth bag, like a person before a surgery, this bird, the cloth bag will take the shape of the bird. Bird won't have any hard surfaces to hit, as well as, so the bird will be in a darker place inside the bag. As a result, bird would be calm, less stressed, and it doesn't have any place to fly around and get injured. So that is why we put a bird in a bird bag. We call this cloth bag a bird bag, and this bird bag will be taken into the banding camp, and we'll get the bird out from it. In a banding camp, we study bird biology. Their ecology, their migration patterns, their molting patterns, how the feathers grow, how they fare this treacherous journey, and all. That is the research aspect. Another very important aspect of a banding camp is through the Sri Lankan National University system, we train future scientists. We train future ornithologists, we train future biologists, field researchers under the actual field conditions. That is extremely important for the sustainability of Sri Lankan science, because these kids will learn the techniques, the actual do's and don'ts in the field under real field conditions with the same pressure that senior researcher would feel. And after the graduation, maybe after years of practice, they'll contribute to the science of biology in Sri Lanka. Here we have molecular biology special students, we have zoology special students, we have environment science special students of the 4th and 3rd year level classes from the University of Colombo. They are all special students of the Department of Zoology and Environment Sciences of the University of Colombo. I am conducting a practical class while I am doing the research. So this is a combo package where students will get trained to do research. They'll learn how the ways of the birds, as well as they'll participate in practical class for their respective courses.
Right? So the green color code goes.
The metal bands has a specific number. The plastic flags also has a specific number. But generally, the plastic flag or these green colored small plastic pieces play a special role because a photographer could photograph this in the field. So resighting or identifying these birds in the field doesn't require a recapture. So with the advent of the digital photography, now we use these plastic leg flags so that we could track the movement of birds through digital photographs. Korakulam freshwater tank is another unique place in Mannar. Mannar generally is a salty place. It has the ocean, it has salty marshes, it has salty lagoons. In Korakulam though, this lake has fresh water. So because of that, the Mannar horses, Mannar donkeys, fishing cats, jungle cats, the grey-stender loris that we have here in Mannar, most of the birds visit this freshwater lake for drinking purposes. For that matter, Korakulam is a very important lifeline for most of the animals living in the Mannar Island. We count large numbers of migratory ducks in Korakulam. Sometimes a flock of 10,000, a flock of 5,000, like large flocks of migratory ducks can be seen in this location during the winter months. Here we try to tag a Eurasian pigeon, a migratory duck from Siberia that only visit to the northern wetlands in Sri Lanka. But in the north, they can be found in large numbers, nowhere else in the island. And we try to tag this pigeon. We call it Gulsari, a character in Central Asian novel. We hope that Gulsari will tell us the connectivity of wetlands in the Mannar Island, in the northern sector of Sri Lanka and beyond. Gavini, we caught that two pigeons, especially the Gulsari, the one we call Gulsari, the Eurasian pigeon, the female pigeon, and we released it at Korakulam, you could remember, right? Yes. So can you tell me like what happened then after? Now you have a fair bit of data.
Yes, sir. From Korakulam tank where it was released, it first flies to Lanka sanctuary. Now this is the bird sanctuary, the Ramsar site where like, thousands of migratory shorebirds and ducks gather.
That's where the flamingos are, right? Normally people go and watch. That's where the big duck
flocks form. Like about 10,000 of ducks at a time. And from Wankali sanctuary, so this place they use it for foraging during the daytime, and from there they fly to Veditalathir Nature Reserve, another foraging ground. So these two spots were frequently used by Gulsari.
And then so we know that they eventually has to go north.
Yes.
So can you tell what you found there?
So from Mannar, so they depart on February. Gulsari departed on February 7th.
I see. Okay.
So she flew through Irunathiv Island here in the Pork Bay. So Irunathiv Island was important if you remember, so that all the migratory shorebirds and ducks during their northward migration
they stop at least once. Yeah, that's a very important wetland in the Pork Bay system. Yeah. So after they leave Pork Bay, they fly straight north, right?
It happens like this, sir. So February 24th, they depart Sri Lanka, and first they enter Tamil Nadu coast and fly along the coastline till Andhra Pradesh, and from there they enter central India and fly kind of north-northeasterly
Do they follow
direction.
a river there?
Actually, no. They flew directly to Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh border. So here there is a reservoir called Gobind Sagar where they stayed for 6 weeks, and this was the first stopover site in their northward migratory road.
I see, they must be fat. So these stopover sites are the refueling stations for these birds. When they fly thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of kilometers into the Arctic, they need to stop and refuel. Like when we are on the move for a longer journey, we stop at gas stations, petrol sheds for refueling. Similarly, these guys has to do that. Without these stopover sites, the population will die because they won't be able to make to the destination. So then after what happened, Gavin?
From there, sir, now this was during May. And in early June, they again departed the second phase of its
so
migratory journey.
Few weeks,
yes, 6 weeks. So then it started the second phase of its migration and completed it in one go. It actually flies over New Delhi, Agra, Haryana, Punjab states, and finally arrive in its destination at Himachal Pradesh. The destination was the Pongdam Reservoir. It's a wetland of global importance, a Ramsar site.
And that's in the Indus Valley.
Yeah,
that's one of the key migratory entry and exit points, right?
To the region, yes.
Okay. From leaving Mannar, now we are entering into the Boondala wetland system in the southern point of the Central Asian flyway. Because beyond Boondala is the ocean of about 8,000 kilometer wide ocean that spans from Boondala to all the way to Antarctica. So a bird that flies from north, and if you continue to fly south, it will enter somewhere in the southern Sri Lanka, and Boondala is one place where it has to stop. So Boondala has been recognized as a Ramsar wetland because of very high density of migratory birds overwinter every year in this place. Boondala used to have about 2,000 flamingos in the winter months. It used to have thriving shellfish fishery like prawns, lobster and shrimp, and it used to have a fairly good numbers of some of the most important birds in the Central Asian flyway. Unfortunately, due to very bad planning in the mid-90s, some of the excess water from the inland tanks of the Hambantota district channeled to Boondala, and with that destroys the Boondala lagoon ecosystem. Now Boondala has mostly fresh water, and as a result no food for migratory birds because they rely on marine invertebrates, and the marine invertebrates can't live in fresh water. So as a result, the lobster fishery, the shrimp fishery and the crab fishery that was thriving till mid-90s disappeared. People got poor, and very few birds now can come and overwinter in Boondala. We are at Boondala here. So we maintain these banding ringing camps in Mannar and Boondala 4 times a year. I'm superficially, for a casual observer, Boondala has a salton, man-made salton. So as Mannar has a salton, and Mannar has one Kale Ramsar site. Boondala has the Boondala Ramsar site. Ramsar sites are the globally most significant wetlands recognized by the global conventions. So it is not just important wetland for Sri Lanka and its birds and its environment, it is considered a global insignificant place. So by looking at it superficially, they both has these saltons, salt exposed mud flats and shrub forests. They both belong to the arid zone of Sri Lanka. However, when you look closely, for example, if you spend a day in Boondala banding station and a day in Talemana banding station, you get a night and day type difference where you get totally different composition of shorebirds, both migratory birds as well as resident birds. In Boondala, you get mostly little stins, lesser sandflowers, curlew sandpipers and red shanks. In Mannar, you get very different composition. You get bar-tailed godwits, crab plover, greater sandflowers and a bit of lesser sandflowers and so on. So the general composition and even the adaptations of these birds that you see in Mannar is different from the birds that you see in Boondala. Boondala represent more like a Sri Lankan arid zone features in the environment as well as the birds living in it. Mannar represent more like Indian, southern arid Indian ecosystem and the birds in it, like even the resident birds like the long-tailed shrikes, collared doves, and then grey francolins you don't see in Boondala. So a day in this sort of a banding camp would be very different for a bander or a naturalist or a scientist when you compare that to a day in Mannar. So let's see, we are going to process this bird. This is a pied kingfisher. It's not a rare bird, but this particular species is a truly adapted species to live with kind of a open water environment. Pied kingfisher is an interesting bird because it's a truly a wetland kingfisher, and it's black and white. It's a beautiful bird, but in our research context, it has a lower priority for us because it's a resident species. It doesn't migrate. So what we do here, since we caught this beautiful bird, we put color rings instead of the metal rings, because metal rings and the flags are expensive. So we use only the relatively cheaper color rings for them, so that we could identify this bird later in the Boondala environment, but we don't expect it to fly long distances. In the banding stations, we study the health of these captured birds. We run blood tests, cholesterol tests, and sometimes tests for heavy metals and bacteria, nowadays viruses. So a kind of a complete health check. We wanted to do that because partly we wanted to understand the health of the individual bird. We want to understand the health of the environment that they live in. The health of the wetland, the health of the forest, the health of the neighboring areas, and so on. Also, we wanted to understand the health of the great ecosystem, either in Boondala or in Mana and so on. Also, we are interested in the health of the planet. Migratory birds are specifically good for that because they fly long distances across the globe. So we would get a snapshot of the health of the planet or health of the globe by understanding the health of the migratory bird. Even though we use mist nets for medium and smaller sized birds, to catch larger birds, we use other techniques. There are other standard techniques to catch large birds. In public television, all these capture techniques cannot be explained, but there are specific approval process, legal process authorized by the Department of Wildlife Conservation for these techniques, and also internationally accepted methods are there. So we use those, but we can't show that in TV. In this session, so we got a Asiatic spoonbill, which is a non-migratory bird, but a very interesting bird because partly it's very pretty, and it's big, and it uses the Boondala great ecosystem. So we wanted to see how this bird utilizes this ecosystem in a longer run. Some scientists that this mode of feeding using this sort of a specialized beak is a bit of a disadvantage for these birds. That's why they are getting rarer and rarer. So, and also, even though this is a resident bird, we thought to put a satellite tag, partly because this bird is a threatened bird in Sri Lanka and also across the globe. It got lots of parasites. Look, tons of them. Okay, and also we caught this bird in Boondala National Park. Boondala is a system of protected areas where Boondala, then Yala, Lunugambihara and Udawalawa are protected areas, significant protected areas, and Kalamatiya in the region. So we wanted to see how this bird would utilize this protected area network in the southern, the heart of this one of the most important wetland systems in the entire world. So we would like to see whether this bird stays throughout its time in Boondala, or would it fly to Lunugambihara or Udawalawa or to Yala or Kalamatiya, or would it use privately owned paddy fields, or would it stay in state protected areas throughout the time, and how long will it stay? So Dr. Nilmini Jayasena from veterinary faculty, University of Peradeniya, she is studying parasites and heavy metal contamination of these birds. So she will try to parasitize and scavenge a little bit. But these are important information. When we catch them, yes, we definitely kind of harass them. That's more. But at the same time, we try to know more about them so that we could help them in the long run. And people like these wildlife officers hopefully would use this sort of technologies, and also the data coming out from such technologies for better management, planning and implementation. Right, now we are going to prepare the jacket. So this jacket, this tag has to go on to the top of the bird, and then this harness is made out of this. This is kite surfing grade. Actually, this material are used for kites, parachutes and gliders. So it's very tough, and this has to last for about 20 years because these birds live they have long lives, and it has to be lightweight and super strong. All the material, even this, are all used for parachutes and gliders. So it's a very high quality material that we are using. So I must say that this is a collaboration. This particular moment is itself a collaboration between two universities, Peradeniya University and University of Colombo, and especially the Field Oncology Group of Sri Lanka, which is part of the University of Colombo, and Chinese Academy of Sciences providing this technology for us in a collaborative basis. Wildlife Department, there are a few officers here, so they are collaborating with us. They are providing facilities and the permits and all. And then as the national broadcaster, Rupavahini Corporation is helping to get the message out. So I mean, we have to, the country is developed like this. We have to do small things, big things together in a collaborative manner. So that is what we are all doing here. So we have this Asiatic spoonbill. So we are going to put a GPS tag or a satellite tag onto this bird. This is a fairly big bird, about 1,800 grams heavy. It's one of the heaviest birds that we are going to tag anyway. And for that, we have this 23-gram tag, which is the heaviest tags we have. And it's very sophisticated, very nice plastic case. And the solar panel is elevated so that the feathers can grow between the tag and the panel. And so we have the luxury of putting a slightly heavier tag because this bird is much heavier than the tag. So the international standard is the tag has to be less than 3% of the body weight of the bird. That means it's actually lighter than an average meal of a bird. So we are going to put this 23-gram tag. So after mounting the tag, the jacket and then the tag onto the bird, we can release the bird. So now we are going to safely release this bird back into its environment with the tag on, and the tag is now on. So after about 8 hours from now on, it will start to give data for us. So we came from one Ramsar site in the north to another Ramsar site in the south to understand more about this phenomena of migration. However, in Boondala, we happened to caught a resident species. We didn't plan for it, but we caught it. So Gayamini, tell us how this data behaves in this spoonbill and its movements.
Yes, sir. So this is where Boondala Sultan, right here, this is where it was tagged and released. And this happened, the tagging we did in January. So within January, this is how it moved around the wetlands around Boondala Sultan and Boondala National Park. Later, in February and March. So this is how it moved. It moved more towards towards west, Malala. And used Malala and Abedikala Lagoon. But always made sure that it flew back to the Boondala Sultan.
And it stays within the, this is a close-up of it, it stays within the forest. Yes. So it didn't really leave national park, right? Yes. It's kind of confined. Probably, I mean, birds, they don't know the boundaries, human boundaries. So this is what we found over the past several years of working with these messengers from the earth. We are a center of global movement. We are connected to Africa we are connected to Middle East, we are connected to Scandinavia, we are connected to Arctic, we are connected to rest of Asia and Far Eastern Russia as well as Australia. We are truly a global hub. And these birds and their movements tell us much more than a story of birds. They tell a story of us. They tell us who we are, where we come from, and what kind of connectivity Sri Lanka has with the rest of the world through life. Because birds are living, breathing things that fly across the globe and connects the Arctic communities, that connects the Himalayan communities, connects the African, Australian communities with communities in Sri Lanka. We know now some of these birds that we tagged in Mannar, for example, flew 20 to 25,000 kilometers into Arctic and back. We know that some of the birds that we tagged in Pesale at sea level flew 24,000 feet into the mountains, and one bird in fact crossed over Everest and went into Tibet and bred. Some of our birds went into the Central Asian grasslands, and some stayed within Sri Lanka, like the one that we tagged in Boondala. So this has a huge significance about our science education, about our ornithology, about our national defense, what kind of bacteria, what kind of diseases come and go from Sri Lanka, what kind of biological threats that we could have in the future, a national defense related matter. It tells about how our wetlands connected to the wetlands of the world. It tells about how connected we are in as a ecosystem, as a life sustaining entity. It tells us how important Sri Lanka in the global biodiversity conservation, our value in the global protection of animals and plants in this planet. It gives a sense of pride, sense of belonging. We are not just an isolated island. We are a hub, a central point in the global movement. The Silk Road, the maritime Silk Road in the bird world is here in Sri Lanka.